Starseed of Gaia, you are receiving this transmission because something inside you already knows that there is a truth that no one has had the courage to tell you. A truth that has been carefully hidden in the deepest layers of collective illusion, disguised as spirituality, wrapped in light and presented as a path of elevation, when in reality it functioned as an invisible chain tied to your energetic ankle, preventing you from truly ascending. I know you arrived at this video carrying a feeling that is difficult to name, that silent restlessness of someone who has been searching for so long and still feels that something fundamental is missing, of someone who has performed rituals, read about chakras, meditates, works on their frequency, and still feels that there is a barrier that simply does not give way, as if there were a closed door right in front of your greatest potential, and you could not find the key. Well, Starseed, what I am going to reveal today will not only hand you that key, but will show you that the door you were trying to open was false, and that the real one has always been somewhere else entirely. Stay until the end, because the message that the Friends of Light have prepared for you in this moment is one of the most important you will receive in this incarnation. And every word was transmitted with precision and intention for your specific energetic field. I am Thalia, emissary of the Pleiadian Council of Stars, and what you are about to hear is a direct transmission, without distortion, without filters, delivered to your energetic system at exactly the moment your consciousness is ready to receive it. You did not arrive at this video by accident, and I need you to understand this not as a comforting phrase, but as a structural truth of the universe, because your vibrational field emitted a recognizable signal that crossed layers of frequency and reached the Council, and the response to that signal is exactly what you are about to hear. Before we continue, if this video is already making sense to you, if you already feel that resonance in your chest that the Pleiadians call recognition of truth, I ask you now to subscribe to this channel. Leave your like and write in the comments the words "I am ready," because that simple gesture is not merely an act of engagement. It is an energetic declaration that you are opening your field to receive what comes next. And every soul that manifests in the comments creates a network of light that amplifies the transmission for everyone around. And before we dive into the depths of this revelation, I need to share something with you that can radically transform your spiritual journey in a much more practical and permanent way, because the Pleiadian Council has prepared a material of extraordinary rarity called Pleiadian Code. Awaken your star mission on Earth, a true treasure of stellar wisdom capable of transforming your spiritual journey from the inside out, with activations, protocols, and revelations that complement everything you will receive in this transmission, and this edition is available for a limited time only, so the link is in the first comment below, and I strongly recommend you access it before the access period is closed. For centuries, the color orange was taught in spiritual circles as a symbol of creativity, vitality, and connection with the sacral chakra. And that teaching is not completely misguided, because every effective lie carries a core of truth within it. And it was precisely that core of truth that allowed one of the greatest energetic traps of the matrix of illusion to be installed in the field of the most sensitive and evolved starseeds on the planet without anyone noticing what was really happening. Orange, as a vibrational frequency, possesses a specific quality that the Pleiadians describe as seduction of false expansion, which is the capacity to create the sensation of movement and growth when in reality the energetic field is contracting in a spiral, in the same way that a candle flame appears to expand at the exact moment it is about to go out, casting one last intense light before complete darkness. Many starseeds were trained to run toward that flame, to embrace orange as an ally, to use it in their practices, in their environments, in their visualizations, without understanding that in doing so, they were opening a side door in their energetic field that allowed the entry of frequencies the Council calls simulacra of abundance, which are patterns that imitate prosperity, creativity, and freedom, but that in their essence vibrate in disguised scarcity, in circular movement without real ascension, in urgency disguised as enthusiasm. The orange frequency, when used without discernment by a starseed who is still in the process of calibration, functions as an amplifier of spiritual ego, creating the illusion that you are advancing in your mission when in reality you are circling around an anchor that you yourself installed. And the most insidious aspect of this mechanism is that it generates a genuine sensation of pleasure and movement. So the body does not signal danger because the danger is disguised as progress, because the imprisonment is dressed in the clothes of expansion, and the starseed continues consuming this frequency enthusiastically while feeling, in a deeper and more silent layer, that something fundamental remains inaccessible. What I need to reveal now is one of the most delicate transmissions the Pleiadian Council has ever authorized, and I ask that you receive it with an open heart and a willing mind, because what comes next may provoke an initial resistance that is completely natural, since resistance is precisely the response of the program when it realizes it is about to be identified and dismantled. There exists, in the etheric layers that surround the Earth, a geometric structure that the Pleiadians call the orange cube, which is not a physical object, but a frequency grid deliberately installed in the collective energetic layers of humanity, created to intercept the energy of the sacral chakra before it reaches the heart, redirecting the creative and reproductive impulse of human beings toward cycles of consumption, comparison, and the search for external validation, keeping consciousness trapped in a loop of never-satisfied desire that feeds the matrix of illusion with the purest energy that exists, which is the energy of creation blocked at its own portal of exit. When a starseed adopts orange as the primary frequency of their spiritual practice, without having first established a solid anchoring in heart frequencies, such as emerald green and Pleiadian gold, they are essentially connecting their energetic system directly to that grid, and instead of transforming the creative impulse into mission, into service, into aligned manifestation, they redirect that energy to the cube, which processes it and returns it as urgency, as impulsiveness, as the constant feeling that you need to do more, have more, prove more, without ever reaching the point of feeling that it is enough. And that feeling of insufficiency, as I mentioned at the beginning of this transmission, is precisely what keeps a starseed trapped in a vibration of scarcity, even when they are surrounded by sophisticated spiritual practices and genuine knowledge about the nature of reality, because intellectual knowledge and real energetic unblocking are two completely different things. And the Orange Cube specializes in creating beings who are very intelligent about spirituality, but who remain emotionally imprisoned in patterns of limitation. The mission of a starseed is, in its simplest essence, to anchor higher frequencies in the physical plane through their own presence, their energetic field, their creations, their relationships, and their way of existing in the world. And for that mission to become real and effective, there needs to be a clean and unobstructed flow between the dimensional source from which that starseed originates and the three-dimensional reality they now inhabit, which means that any frequency that distorts that channel, any pattern that fragments the coherence of the energetic field, any color or vibration that redirects energy before it reaches its natural destination, functions as a direct and profound mission blocker. Orange, when operating as a frequency of false light, is one of the most effective mission blockers that exist precisely because it does not look like an obstacle, because it presents itself as an ally, as an accelerator, as a tool of power. And when adopted by a starseed who has not yet learned to distinguish between real expansion and simulated expansion, it creates a specific type of paralysis disguised as movement that the Pleiadians call stagnation at speed, which is when you are moving a great deal, creating a great deal, speaking a great deal, posting a great deal, without ever truly advancing in the direction your soul came to advance. You may have felt this at some point in your journey, that feeling of being extremely busy with spiritual things without feeling that you are arriving anywhere that truly matters, of producing a great deal of content without feeling that you are touching the souls you are meant to touch, of being present in many spiritual spaces without feeling that you deeply belong to any of them. And that feeling, which is often interpreted as a sign that you need to do more or try differently, is in reality Your energetic system attempting to communicate that the direction is not the problem, but rather the frequency with which you are operating, because when the field is contaminated by the vibration of the orange cube, more effort only deepens the loop, and the way out is not in working harder within the same pattern, but in identifying and uninstalling the pattern itself, which is exactly what this transmission is beginning to do in your field right now. Now that you understand the mechanism of imprisonment, the moment has arrived when the Pleiadian Council will reveal which frequency genuinely supports the mission of Starseeds, which is the color that was not merely permitted, but that was activated in the most ancient layers of stellar tradition as the chromatic code of real ascension, one that does not seduce but nourishes, that does not create urgency, but instead installs a quiet and immovable certainty that you are exactly what you need to be to accomplish what you came to accomplish. Pleiadian gold is a frequency that very few spiritual systems mention correctly, because it is not associated with the gold of the ego, with the gold of material wealth as proof of worth, with the gold of status that needs to be displayed in order to exist, but with a specific gold that vibrates between solar yellow and soft amber, which is the color of consciousness that has learned to receive without collapsing, to shine without burning, to be fully visible without needing an audience to feel real. When you replace the orange frequency with the Pleiadian golden frequency in your daily practice, what happens is not a dramatic and instantaneous transformation, as the Matrix has conditioned you to expect, but something much deeper and more permanent, which is a gradual and consistent reorganization of your energetic field around a different center of gravity, a center that is not the desire to have more or to be more, but the full presence of what you already are in your stellar essence. And, from that reorganization, manifestation ceases to be a technique you practice and becomes a natural consequence of the coherence of your field, in the same way that light does not need to try to illuminate, because illuminating is simply what it does when there are no obstacles in its path. There are specific signs that the Pleiadian Council has identified as indicators that the orange frequency is operating in a disruptive way in a starseed's field, and these signs are subtle enough to go unnoticed in the busyness of daily life, but are also consistent enough to create a recognizable pattern when you learn to observe them with the correct consciousness, which is the consciousness of someone investigating their own energetic field with the same seriousness and precision that a scientist investigates a physical phenomenon, without judgment but also without complacency, with genuine curiosity and with a real willingness to see what is there. The first sign is the compulsion toward creative urgency, that feeling that you have to create now, post now, launch now, as if the universe were going to close the window of opportunity if you do not act within the next few minutes, which is precisely the opposite of the golden frequency that operates in calm certainty and aligned timing, never in panic disguised as inspiration. The second sign is the constant need for validation in order for creation to feel real, which manifests as compulsive checking of likes and comments right after posting something, as a feeling of emptiness when feedback is not immediate, as a difficulty in valuing one's own work without the confirmation of others. And all of this points to a sacral chakra that is being fed by the orange cube instead of by the original source of stellar creation, which is completely self-sufficient and does not need external mirrors to know what it is. The third sign is the most important and at the same time the most difficult to identify, because it hides within what appears to be genuine spiritual enthusiasm. And that sign is the feeling that you are always one step away from a great revelation or a great expansion that never quite arrives, as if there were always one more course, one more activation, one more crystal, one more practice that will finally take you to the place where you feel you belong. And that eternal promise of arrival, that never happens, is the orange cube's favorite field of operation, because it keeps the starseed in permanent motion within a labyrinth elegantly designed to look like a journey of ascension. The Council does not transmit only diagnosis, and it is here that this transmission goes beyond anything you have probably ever encountered on the subject, because the Pleiadians are beings of extraordinary precision, who understand that human consciousness does not transform through information alone, but through concrete practices that create new somatic experiences, new cellular memories, new references that the nervous system can use to recognize as safe that which was previously unknown, and the unknown is always what the orange cube's frequency uses as fuel to maintain imprisonment, because a being who has never experienced what it is to operate outside the loop of urgency and validation has no internal reference for what that different place feels like. And without that reference, returning to the loop seems less like a capitulation and more like a return to reality. The first step of the protocol is what the Council calls the golden frequency bath, which is not a superficial visualization exercise, but a practice of conscious immersion, in which you dedicate at least 15 uninterrupted minutes to the feeling of having nothing to prove, nothing to achieve, and nothing to do other than to exist fully in the present moment, breathing slowly and imagining that every cell of your body is being bathed in a golden light that does not come from outside, but that emanates from within, from the core of your stellar essence. The second step is the practice of creation without audience, in which you create something, whether writing, art, music, dance, cooking, any form of creative expression, with the explicit intention that this act will not be shared with anyone, will not be published, will not be commented upon. And the purpose of this practice is not isolation, but the calibration of creation back to its original source, which is the pure joy of expression without the weight of performance. And this recalibration is what begins to disconnect the energetic field from the orange cube and to reconnect creative energy to the direct channel of stellar mission. The third step is the conscious choice of chromatic environments, which means observing carefully which colors dominate the spaces where you spend most of your time, both physically and digitally, and beginning to gradually introduce gold, emerald green, and celestial blue in positions of prominence, not as decoration, but as a declaration of frequency, as a way of telling your energetic field that you are establishing a new pattern of visual and vibrational reference that is not compatible with the architecture of imprisonment. When the starseed completes the process of deactivating the orange frequency and establishes the Pleiadian golden frequency as the foundation of their field, something happens that cannot be adequately described in words alone, but that can be instantly recognized by any soul who has gone through that transition, and that something is the feeling that the mission for which you came ceases to be a search and becomes a memory that is waking up, as if you always knew exactly what you came here to do, and had simply needed to remove the layers of distortion that were preventing that memory from reaching the surface of everyday consciousness with the clarity and strength necessary to become real action in the physical world. The creativity that emerges after this transformation is no longer the anxious and urgent creativity fed by the orange cube, which produces much and resonates little, but a serene and deep creativity that produces less and resonates with a devastating precision, that reaches the right souls at the right moment, and that creates connections which are soul-level recognitions. Connections that do not need engagement strategies to exist, because they are driven by a real frequency that the human field intuitively recognizes as truth. And that is the fundamental difference between a starseed operating in orange frequency and a starseed operating in Pleiadian golden frequency, that the former is constantly trying to convince the world that they exist, while the latter simply exists and allows the world to respond to the truth of their presence, not because they are passive or inactive, but because they have understood that the most powerful action is the one that is born from the quiet center of energetic coherence, and that every action born of urgency, of fear of missing out, of the desire to prove or of the need for validation, even if it produces visible results in the short term, is feeding a field that will eventually demand a price that no level of external success will be able to compensate. Just as the Council has transmitted in other messages, the transition from an old frequency to a new one never happens without the field going through a series of tests that are in reality the old system making its final attempt at maintenance. And in the specific case of the orange frequency, that test has a very particular characteristic because it presents itself in exactly the form of a great creative or spiritual opportunity that seems urgent, that seems brilliant, that seems to be exactly what you were waiting for. And that possesses all the visual and sensory characteristics of the frequency you have just identified as imprisonment, as if the universe were testing whether you have truly learned to distinguish between real gold and the brilliance that imitates gold with a perfection that deceives even trained eyes. The discernment criterion that the Pleiadian Council offers for that moment of testing is simple in its formulation, but profound in its application, and that criterion is the following. Any opportunity or calling that requires you to abandon your inner peace in order to grasp it is operating in the frequency of the orange cube, regardless of how it presents itself, of how spiritual it appears, of how profitable it promises to be, or of how much urgency it carries in its message. Because true abundance, whether financial, creative, relational, or spiritual, never requires you to sacrifice your internal coherence to receive it, and anything that demands that sacrifice is not abundance, but is its exact opposite, wearing a very well-made mask. Starseed, we have arrived at the most important moment of this transmission, which is not the moment in which I end my words, but the moment in which you decide what you are going to do with what you received here. Because information without decision is merely additional noise in a field that already has too much noise. And what the Pleiadian Council expects of every soul that received this message is not an instantaneous and dramatic transformation, but a quiet and firm decision that from now on, you will observe where orange operates in your field with more curiosity than judgment, will cultivate the golden frequency with more consistency than intensity, and will trust that your stellar mission does not need urgency to be realized, because it is as real, as ancient, and as inevitable as the light of the stars from which you came, which continue shining with the same constancy for billions of years, without any performative effort, without any need for approval, and without any doubt about their purpose or their worth. I am Thalia, and it has been an honor to be in this space with you today, because every transmission shared between the stars and the earth is a thread of light that strengthens the network of consciousness that is transforming this planet. And you are an essential part of that network, not because you did something special to deserve that place, but because your presence here, in this exact moment, is the living proof that the message arrived where it needed to arrive. With Pleiadian love, until the next transmission.